For those of you dialed into Toronto Blue Jays Twitter, you saw the absolute mayhem that was last night. Every single arbitration eligible player has now come to a deal to avoid arbitration. The big one, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Let's get into it all today on
You are Locked On Blue Jays, your daily Toronto Blue Jays podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jays. Thank you for making Locked On Blue Jays your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. But for the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. As always, I'm Braden Wasco. He's Carter First. You can find us on Twitter, Braden5Wasco, Carter First too, as well on Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Blue Jays. If you're new here to YouTube or you're listening anywhere else, make sure you hit the subscribe button. It helps us out. It's free to do so. You might as well. We're getting up there. You guys have been killing it as of late with the subscriptions, the likes, the comments. It's been unbelievable. For those of you not in the Discord channel yet, I know we post, we've been trying to post more and more on Twitter, but the Discord is very active. We get all of your guys' opinions. You can hear from us in there as well on a day-to-day basis. So make sure you go down in the description. You join that Discord link as well. Crazy day last night, Carter. I was at work. I know me and you, and we have a group chat for the Locked On Blue Jays boys who sort of pop on here once in a while as well. They were sending us messages. Everybody losing their minds on Twitter as the arbitration numbers and results have come out. Who is going to arbitration? Who is not? Well, it turns out no one is. Every single player arbitration eligible avoid it. So I'll start here. I'm gonna go into them, list them off, and then I'll sort of get your thoughts and feelings afterwards. Ernie Clement, 1.975 million. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., obviously the 28.5. I'm struggling. Alejandro Kirk, 4.6. Alek Manoah, 2.2. Zach Pop, 900,000. Nick Sandlin, 1.63. Daulton Varsho, 8.2. Those are some big numbers, some interesting numbers, Carter. And I think out of all of this, obviously we'll get into talking about Vlad, what this means for the future of him, and something else has come out from Hector Gomez. We'll preface everything we say around Hector Gomez into believe what you want to believe, think what you want to think, because we don't necessarily take everything Hector Gomez has to say with the likelihood of it happening. But here we are. Carter, just about, I guess let's just start here. The arbitration, getting all these players done without having to go into arbitration and having to go through the hearing and who's going to come out with what. Is it a big deal that these players all avoided that arbitration?
As for the guys like Zach Pop, your Ernie Clements, your Alek Manoahs, Alejandro Kirk's, not as big of a deal for those guys. These guys in these calibers always get into their arbitration. There's no point in going to arbitration for a guy that's, again, maybe a league average, slightly above league average. Really no point in ruining those relationships over 500,000, 250,000. Once you get to those higher arbitration cases, it matters a little bit more. Before we get into the big one, I'm going to start with Daulton Varsho. Daulton Varsho with the $8.2 million. A lot of people on Blue Jays Twitter were kind of 50-50 on this that I saw. A lot of the outsiders were like, especially like fans of other MLB teams were like, why is Daulton Varsho getting $8.2 million? He hit like 225 last year. Doesn't make any sense. Then you had half Toronto Blue Jays Twitter being like, that's probably a bargain for Daulton Varsho with all the defense he's playing, how good he is obviously out there in the outfield. And then with the bat, if he can be a league average, probably still a bargain for Daulton Varsho. And then there's the other side that just used like the batting average uses, the on-base percentages. Like the baseline stats don't really read into Daulton Varsho, the baseball player, just kind of looking at the stats. That's why stats can be misleading in some situations. I think $8.2 million for Daulton Varsho is a good deal. I don't think that is worrisome whatsoever. I don't think that is something you should be mad about. Getting one of the best defensive players in all of baseball for $8.2 million. If he can be league average next season at the plate, that will be great. But the only problem with that I have that he's going to miss the first month and a half of the season. We've seen how this works when players miss spring training. For a guy like Daulton Varsho, who has struggled at the plate in the last couple of seasons, Probably not the greatest thing for him to miss that first month of the season and all of spring training. But we'll dive into Vladimir Guerrero Jr. This was a must for me. It had to happen. You have Vladimir Guerrero Jr. mid-contract talks, you're mid-extension talks. You're right in the realm of things. If you go to arbitration and you're fighting over $1.5 million, $2 million at this point, when you're going to be paying $450+ million in free agency, if you want this guy to come back, it just wouldn't make sense to ruin those relationships. Maybe even more that they're already ruined going into these contract talks. But Vladimir Guerrero Jr., $28.5 million. That's the third highest arbitration in MLB history. The only ones being over that was Shohei Ohtani, Juan Soto. And if you look at what they signed in free agency, hopefully that isn't exactly what we're going to see in this upcoming free agency, but they have the two highest contracts in MLB history. So maybe Vladdy is on track to follow in those footsteps.
Well, me and you talked about it, Carter, many times before this. I know we've talked a lot about Vladdy as of late, but it is the big story right now, right? Aside from the free agents and who the Toronto Blue Jays are going to bring in, the big fish right now is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. You need to get that extension done to secure the future of this organization. Nothing has come out yet, but we'll get into the Hector Gomez tweets of it all in a bit. But just talking about Vlad's straight arbitration, you're right. This is something you could not go into for a second year in a row while you're trying to scrap together some sort of long-term extension for Vlad. Again, we've heard the $450 million, we've heard the $500 million, but you're right, on track. If you're looking at Shohei Ohtani, Juan Soto, is there a possibility that it even exceeds 550, 600? Probably, right? I think we can't be naive to that after, I know you said this past offseason, Carter, when before Juan Soto signed, you didn't think it was going to get anywhere near the Shohei Ohtani money. And then that happened. And I was sort of on the other end, and I'm thinking, well, this is just now the way of the world. This is how this is going to work. Every big superstar that comes up, teams are going to be scrapping and clawing to get their piece of what could be a great MLB player, a Hall of Famer eventually, who knows? So I think when we look at Vladimir Guerrero Jr., we're going to get into the whole, what to pay him. Should they pay him now? He's made the point that he wants to have this done before the start of the season, before spring training. He doesn't want to have to go into the season worrying about a long-term extension. But you're Carter. Yeah. Just talking about Vlad. I mean, it's an exceptional arbitration. It's unbelievable. But I think it's huge for this organization to miss the fact of having to go and argue against your player that you're wanting to keep in this organization. You want to keep those feelings good within the team, within the organization, with the player, with the agent, everything involved. And I think if you had to go into one of those meetings and say why you don't think Vlad is worth that amount of money, I think for 2 years in a row, that's going to hurt him, and that's going to hurt the extension talks. And I think you could almost paint the rest of the year as, okay, Vlad's leaving at the end of this year because the Blue Jays absolutely destroyed him in the hearings. So this is, I think, a very good step for this organization into mending those bridges and trying to keep Vladimir Guerrero Jr. here for the long term. All right, I just want to go back to one thing you talked about with Daulton Varsho as well before we continue on with Vlad. There's going to be a lot of Vlad stuff coming out of the me and you here talking about arbitration 2025, 2026, what he's going to look like. But just going back to Daulton Varsho, yeah, there was a lot of parody, I'll say, on Twitter of not sure how to feel about Daulton Varsho's arbitration contract here. I don't understand really the complaint here. You're getting a guy for under 10 million who's, if not the best defender in the league, he's probably top 3 right now. And I don't know. I think you see the promise in what Daulton Varsho's bat can be. I think we haven't seen him get there yet. But I think you're paying that money for him to be that lockdown center fielder that balls just don't get by. This guy gets to everything. And if you're going to pay one of your outfielders, granted, you're already paying George Springer a ton of money, but I think paying Daulton Varsho that kind of cash is not the worst thing in the world for a lockdown defender who, obviously likes to be here in Toronto. We always talk about that. You want guys that want to play for your team, and Daulton Varsho seems like the guy that wants to make a difference on this organization. We'll see if his bat can wake up, but I think for the price that they paid, I think you got to be happy with that signing. Again, let us know what you guys think about all of the arbitration numbers, the contracts, everything down in the comments. We want to hear your guys' opinion. If you're not subscribed here on YouTube, make sure you head over to our Twitter pages. You can shoot us a tweet or Instagram. TikTok, whatever you want to do. Leave us a comment somewhere. We'll try to get back to you, or at least take your thoughts and opinions into consideration. Carter, going back to Vlad, do you think that this was just trying to rebuild some of that foundation of trust between the organization and the player?
I mean, it's not going to hurt that, obviously, but I don't think a lot of people on Twitter are saying this is a massive step in these contract negotiations. I don't think it's necessarily that. I just think this needed to happen if you want even a chance to sign Vladimir Guerrero Jr. It is nice that they had a mutual agreement, that they did reach a number on $28.5 million. But does this mean that this contract extension is going to be reached? In my head, no. That's not a for sure thing. It can happen. And as we'll get into the Hector Gomez article here, just the tweet, I guess, wasn't really an article from him. But that, again, with all that on top of each other, you get the arbitration signing, you get the Hector Gomez tweet, then a lot of people, I think, are overreacting slightly on this. For me, it's not this massive step that they took towards signing a contract with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. It's just, if you don't get that done, then you're just in a whirlwind of emotions. You're in a whirlwind of arguments between the Toronto Blue Jays and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And it's probably not going to be a good thing at the end of the day. So this is, again, it's definitely a good thing, but I wouldn't say it's like this huge step towards a contract extension. But one thing I want to go into quickly is that before last season, $19.9 million, and Blue Jays, I think it was 18.05 was what the arbitration argument was. So about $2 million off there. I'm wondering if we're going to see stuff come out that maybe Vladdy was a little bit higher, maybe the Toronto Blue Jays were a little bit lower, and then the Blue Jays just decided, because of the contract extension talks coming up, they just said, like, for this, is it worth fighting with the $1.5 million, $2 million, or is it worth just making Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at least a little bit happier going into this offseason, or going into this 2020 offseason?
Yeah, I agree. I think, we'll see, eventually we'll find out sort of what the numbers were, what the true numbers were, everything like that. There is speculation on everything. But yeah, I think that's definitely what it was. It was, we can sacrifice the $2 million because I think in their back of their heads, they're knowing that if they want to extend this guy, they're going to be paying him a whole heck of a lot more than what they're getting him for arbitration. And it's a year sooner. So I think you try to temper feelings and thoughts within Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s head by just saying, okay, here, just take it. Let's not fight about this. Let's not turn the clubhouse sort of against each other or against this front office. So I believe that totally. I think that this was an absolute move to, I think, bolster things for the future in future talks. That's definitely where I'm at in my head with this. But Carter, I know you talked about the Hector Gomez tweets. I want to get into that. Some of the fan reactions to what happened. A lot going on Twitter. I screenshotted a couple of them. I want to get your opinions, sort of talk through my opinions on what some people had to say just based on what happened with the arbitration, with the Vladimir Guerrero Jr. extension talks, everything sort of in that vein. So I think let's take a quick break. We'll come back with sort of all that right after. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. I always talk about Game Time because it's my favorite place to find tickets for all my live events, whether it's sports, music, comedy, concerts, theater, whatever it may be. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert last year. The energy, the excitement, it was all unforgettable, and it was all thanks to Game Time. They make it super easy, especially with their new feature, Game Time Picks. The feature filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Actually, we just went through this the other day. We were looking for Winnipeg Jets versus Vancouver Canucks tickets. Went on Game Time. It literally said, "Here's the best deal. Do you want to take it?" And it made it that much easier to get our tickets to make sure we could hit up that game as well. So looking forward to that in the future, and that's all thanks to Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So, Carter, it's time. We got to talk about it. The Hector Gomez tweet, like him or hate him or trust him or don't trust him. It's definitely a talking point, right? And I think I sent this to our group chat, Carter, and you might have said something like, well, it's a Hector Gomez tweet. And I gave you the old, what's this guy? When he does like the hands to the side. Like, I don't know what to think, but it's there. So here it is. I'll read it out, Carter. Give me your take, and then I'll sort of throw back at you what I'm thinking here. The Toronto Blue Jays to make a second contract extension offer to Vladimir Guerrero Jr., which will be very close to what the player is looking for. What do you have to think about that? Like, is this just the most obvious thing in the world that obviously the Blue Jays are going to make another offer now, or do you think this is just pulling out of the air? Like, where do you think this is going to go after these arbitration talks?
It's sort of off the surface seems like a clicks thing for me, because all of a sudden you're at a point where you're at $340 million for the contract that they offered before, Vladdy wanting $450 million. So the only way that this kind of makes sense in my head is that if they saw all these rumors, they saw how far that they were off on a contract for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and they got Edward Rogers, they got the Rogers ownership together in a room, and they're like, hey, if we don't up this offer, we might as well just completely waste this offseason, go into the next offseason and pay the 550 million. Maybe those are the talks they were having as well. They know that if they let this reach free agency, if they want Vladimir Guerrero Jr. back on their team and they let it reach the 2026 free agency, they are going to be paying a hell of a lot more than $450 million for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And it was funny because we just talked about Vladdy on the Wednesday episode, and I said there's no way that they're going to be able to compromise between $450 million and then $340 million. And now we have Hector Gomez with, this tweet. How much can you really take away from this? For me personally, nothing against Hector Gomez, but he's one of the guys that I don't really take a lot of the things that he says with face value. Like, I'm more of a Ben Nicholson-Smith guy, Bob Nightingale. Like, again, different guys like this. Fiend Sands another good one. But again, it's nice to see these, because when you talk about a guy like Bichette, we don't see any contract extension rumors. Don't see anything along the lines of Bichette remaining in Toronto past this next season. So it is nice to see something positive amongst Vladimir Guerrero Jr., but definitely treading lightly as to how much validity I'm taking with going into this upcoming season.
Yeah, Carter. I mean, I know we haven't really done a whole lot on Bichette lately, and sadly, because again, I'm one of those people that think you need to re-sign Bichette. I love Bichette on this team, guy who's led the league twice in hits. I think this is somebody that you should be looking to extend. I don't know why those conversations aren't happening, and maybe it's because the money's all over the place, and maybe we'll have to do a whole episode on just what is in the world is going on with him and this organization. But yeah, right now, what I'm looking at, I agree with you, Carter, right? You got your guys, Shai Davidi, Ben Nicholson-Smith, all these guys who are very trustworthy for the most part. I mean, again, all these guys are from the media. They're going to get things wrong. Hector Gomez, how much do I trust it? Not overly, but at the end of the day, it's the conversation that needs to happen now, right? It's the narrative that has to be pushed, because I think we've said this time and time again that the fans understand what needs to be done here. You have to bite the bullet and pay the man, just because you know what's going to happen. You've seen what's happened. You've seen Shohei Ohtani. You've seen Juan Soto. You've seen all these players get more than they probably should. And now I think it's very dumb of people to think that Vlad's going to go into this offseason and not get probably more than he's asking for the Toronto Blue Jays. I think it's a little bit of a hometown discount. He wants to play here. He wants to be here. So at the end of the day, I think that this has some validity in the sense that, yeah, it's just sort of what we all think. It's just that, does the organization think this way? That's the biggest question. I don't know. Maybe there is a second offer that's about to come down the pipeline, and maybe we'll be talking about this on Monday as well, because maybe something happens. But we've also had these conversations for the past 2 seasons where we said, make them the offer, make them the offer, make them the offer. Nothing happens. They can never figure anything out. So I don't know. Vlad's talked about how he wants the deal done before the start of the season. Well, I think all the fans do too. I don't know why this organization's waiting and testing their luck. They've come out on the short end of the stick how many times now, and you're willing to go again? You're willing to be a team's sort of whatever plan? I don't even want to say a backup plan, because these players don't need backup plans. You're the one that has to now pivot from what your original plan was. So I don't know. This has sort of been swirling in my head all day, Carter, just with the many possibilities coming out of this. And again, I guess to sort of cap off my feelings here around this is that I'm happy that they didn't have to go to arbitration and they didn't have to slander one of their own players to get a better discount, that they were able to become mutual. But I don't know where it goes from here, personally.
See, at least it is a step in the right direction. You can't take any negativity away from this arbitration hearing. But it's just weird because we talked about the Bob Nightingale article that came out saying how off they are. I got a Shai Davidi quote here, which is pretty funny. I'll just read it out. As a result, the industry seems to have treated the Blue Jays like a party guest who's a 2 at 10 p.m., just waiting to become someone's 10 at 2 a.m. It's hilarious, but it's disappointing as well because we're Toronto Blue Jays fans and we've seen the podium presence. We've seen being in on all these free agents and not getting them. We've seen the Ross Atkinson company lowball all these free agents, lowball Vladimir Guerrero Jr., lowball a lot of these top free agents, top players that can change a franchise. So it's kind of at the point where it's like, what are you going to believe? You're going to believe one quote from Hector Gomez. Again, it's far, you really want to believe that because you want the Toronto Blue Jays to be good. Or are you going to believe what we've kind of seen throughout history, what a lot of the other analysts are saying? Again, unless in the last couple of days, they had a huge meeting at Rogers and said, we kind of have to pull our heads out of our butt here, figure this out and get a contract offer that actually has a chance of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. being a Toronto Blue Jay for an extended period of time, whether that's 10 years, 12 years, 15 years. At this point, doesn't really matter for a lot of Toronto Blue Jays fans. We just want some sort of certainty for the future. Not a lot of fans are ready for a rebuild. Some are. Maybe we think we should rebuild. But once you actually get into that rebuild, where it takes 4, 5, 6 years, that is going to be we're going to be down in the dumps, especially as guys that are having a podcast, guys that watch 160, 150. Again, maybe with summer, it's a little bit different, but a good majority of the games, probably over 80% of the games, spending so much time in the summer watching the Toronto Blue Jays, especially in Canada, when you get, 4 good months of summer, if that. I think that might be on the high side. So we want this team to be good, and it all does start with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Just keep this guy on our baseball team.
Yeah, man. You know what? There's only so much that can be done. There's only so much that we can talk about. And you're right. For guys who have a podcast, we got a funny comment the other day that said, if the Toronto Blue Jays rebuild, what happens to all these Blue Jays podcasts? Well, I don't know.
Pain happens. That's it.
Yeah, yeah. It's not going to be a fun time on the show here if that's the case. I mean, again, we do it because we love this team, and that's about it. And the interactions are great and whatever else. So, for us, it's we're probably going to be doing this anyway. But for some of the other ones, and a lot of those other ones are network shows. So those guys are paid by big corporations to put on these shows. So, but for those littler podcasts, the just buddies shooting the whatever in the basement. It might be a rough time in just sort of in general, but
it's just a lot more fun talking about a good baseball team, whether you have a podcast, whether you're a guy that watches 2 Toronto Blue Jays games a year, a guy that watches just casually. It doesn't matter how you're involved with the team. And no matter what way you look at it, it is a lot more fun to watch a team that at least has a chance to make the playoffs rather than what we saw in July of last season where the Toronto Blue Jays were pretty much out of playoff contention at that point.
God, that was just brutal, man. I there was games that me and you would sit there and watch, and the Blue Jays would lose, and we just get up off the couch and just go to our rooms. Like we wouldn't even. There would be no talking. It would just like, yeah, another one. All right, and we'll have to wait and see. We'll see what the season brings. We'll see what comes about from this Vlad situation. What comes out of the arbitration, and this is my other thought. I'll leave sort of you with this, Carter, and tell me what you think. You were talking about, were there conversations that were had within the past few days that maybe shifted all of this? Well, the one thing that comes to my head is you're talking in arbitration, you're having these conversations, obviously having to get these deals done. Is this where the conversation around Vlad started to happen and realization started to set in that like, wow, we can't take this guy to arbitration. Oh my goodness, we can't take this guy to free agency because we know what's going to happen. We're going to get outbid. And in my head, maybe this is the point where maybe there is a little bit validity to what Hector Gomez tweeted out.
Well, and maybe that they saw the Bob Nightingale article as well and said, if the Toronto Blue Jays don't sign him, you might go to the Boston Red Sox. Then you're going to have to deal with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in your division, 13 games a year for 10, 12, 15 years, whatever it is, with the Boston Red Sox. Going to hurt a whole lot more, especially if he doesn't sign with the Toronto Blue Jays. And if it is in the AL East, would hurt no matter where it is. Probably would hurt a little bit more again if it's with the Yankees. With the Boston Red Sox, not too much better of an alternative. One more thing that I do want to get into before we do head to the break is kind of just where our current payroll is after these arbitration hearings. So according to Spot Track, the projected total allocations now are $192.5 million, as the luxury tax is at $241 million. In theory, gives the Toronto Blue Jays still the opportunity to buy Santander, go and get a guy like that, still maybe add to the starting pitching, maybe add to the bullpen. Again, there's not going to be a Santander, Bregman, Alonso, Tanner Scott. That's not really in the Toronto Blue Jays cards. But Santander and maybe one more viable piece for the bullpen or a starting pitch, and then probably some lower tier moves, maybe one more to the bullpen. Don't necessarily see it being a massive signing if they do land a guy like Santander. But in theory, the Toronto Blue Jays can make moves. But again, are they going to actually make the moves is the real question.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Because and you know what? So I was all over Twitter last night, and I pulled together just a bunch of reaction because it was crazy. It was mayhem on Twitter. Like things were trending. It was like I couldn't even stop scrolling because new stuff would just keep popping up. So I screenshotted a few that sort of made me think, and I thought, okay, you know what? Let's talk about this on the podcast. Let's sort of see where we're feeling, because I think me and you, when it comes to different things like this, when things pop off, we have a little bit different reactions. And, me and you don't really get into it a whole ton on the podcast, like really have good arguments. So I figure some of these might stir the pot a little bit. So I think let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll sort of react to what the fans reacted to in terms of arbitration when we come back. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's unbelievable. So all you have to do is bet the $5. You'll get the $200 in bonus bets. That's free money. That's free money you can throw on any different game, any different props, some same-game parlays, some live games. Do whatever you want. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need to place live bets, same-game parlays, like I said, so much more. I'm a live game guy. I like to know what's going on, place my bets, who's doing well, and that's how I sort of determine how I'm feeling. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So, Carter, just getting into some fan reactions here. I've got a ton of them, so you might have to let me scroll here for a few minutes. But I guess let's start with this. The Blue Jays and Vladdy have given this franchise a pulse. What I'm very intrigued by is he agreed under. He could have went to a hearing to get over 30. It's a sign of good faith, and it's a sign that the front office is willing to meet the price within reason. We live to fight another day. It's a great tweet. I sort of love that we live to fight another day. But do you think that this was a good grace on Vladdy or a good showing just sort of as partners, as the front office and Vladdy being together for so long, there was just a mutual understanding? Or do you think this was Vladdy saying, I'll take $2 million less this year because I know I'm about to get a ton more next season?
See, like if Vladdy really wanted to have an ego, like going over again the top 5 arbitrations in history, Swanson at 31 million, Shohei at 30 million, Vladdy now at 28.5, Mookie Betts 27, Nolan Arenado 26. If this is more, I would say like NFL, where they kind of have the egos, especially with the quarterbacks when you see it. Right now, I think it's Dak Prescott who is the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. Dak Prescott's not the best quarterback in the NFL, but you always see it. You saw Patrick Mahomes sign that $50 million deal, then you had the next guy sign a $51 million deal, the next guy sign a $53 million deal. Just shows that Vladdy isn't really like self-centered in that way. He's not trying to just go out and get the highest arbitration value. If you look at $28.5 million, it's the third highest arbitration contract, or I guess pre-arbitration contract in MLB history. So it's like $28.5 million is still a lot of money for a guy like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And MLB trade rumors had him projected at $29.6 million. So anywhere between like the $30 million to the $27 million range, I think is pretty fair. And it might just be the same point of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. on the other side of it. It's a little bit different because I'd rather have Vladimir Guerrero Jr. have the money probably than Rogers, especially because Rogers just going to be a lot more wealthy than Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is. But when you're talking about this contract, like $28.5 million, still a lot of money, still worth it for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He's probably focused on this season, just getting the arbitration process over with. Probably already is kind of getting sick of arguing with the Toronto Blue Jays about money and contract extensions. This one, in the grand scheme of things, not going to matter nearly as much as the one he's going to talk about continuing on this offseason, and then hopefully not into the next offseason.
Okay, Carter, I'm going to hit you with another one. This one's from Matthew Cause of TSN 1050. And this is just, I just want your reaction to this one. Just sign Vladdy. You're not the smart team. You're not the development team. So be the big spending team. Otherwise, the Jays don't have a chance. To me, this is a little bit nail on the head. I think we've seen this organization make some not the brightest idea, not the brightest moves of all time, not making the right decisions sometimes, not having plan Bs. They're not the smartest team in the book. I think we were well aware of that. The development process, you can look back. Yes, they developed Vlad and Bo, and that was great. But you look at where this farm system is right now, and yes, hopefully you're hoping some of those guys come up, but probably one of your biggest pieces, I would say two of your top three pieces right now that you're looking for in the future have just come from the Houston Astros, who now develop these players, besides obviously of Orelvis Martinez. But Will Wagner and Jake Bloss, both Houston Astros, that's where they were developed. So is this sort of where you're in too? Are you saying they need to be the big spending team and willing to pay these guys? Or do you think that it is a possibility for them still to be smart, be intelligent, make the correct moves, and develop players? I'm sort of a little bit in the middle here.
I agree with part of what he said. When you said the Toronto Blue Jays aren't the smartest organization, don't necessarily agree with that. The only trade as of recently that I don't like is the Teoscar Hernandez trade. I'm not sure why you're trading Teo for Erik Swanson, just a relief pitcher in general. When you have a power hitter that can hit 25, 30 home runs. Again, I understand it at the time as well. We got to look at it in retrospect when you had a lineup of George Springer, who was actually hitting like George Springer, above average only hitter, Bichette leading the league in hits, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Teoscar Hernandez, Lourdes Gurriel, Matt Chapman. At that time, you had this influx of power. But honestly, looking at the Dodgers, look at other teams around the league, I don't think you can have too much power. It's like you can't have too much pitching in that sense. So I don't think the Toronto Blue Jays are necessarily a dumb organization. I just don't think Ross Atkins wants to stick his neck out and overpay for a guy, take that big risk. They're not a risk-taking organization is the way I would put it. They like to play on the safer side. They like to just, again, not want to overpay for a lot of these players. But I don't necessarily think they're not a smart organization. Developing players, not the greatest at that, as we've seen, especially with the pitching. There's like no pitching prospects on this team right now. There's no pitching depth on this team right now. Definitely agree with him. But at this point in the offseason, the way that Ross Atkins has made his bed, got to agree with this as well. I think you do have to be that team that does go out and kind of like the New York Yankees way. Go and overpay for a guy like Anthony Santander, for example. At this point, now you haven't signed Vladimir Guerrero Jr. You made your own bet with that. You're probably going to have to go out and overpay for Vladimir Guerrero Jr., especially if you're going to wait until the next season. So again, when we talk about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in this sense, I'll kind of leave it at this. It's if you want Vladimir Guerrero Jr. on your team, you might as well fork over the $475 million rather than waiting until the next offseason and paying inevitably paying more than that anyway.
Yeah, and I agree to an extent. On the smart side, I'm a little bit more in the middle than you. I don't think they're the smartest organization because I think that they probably should have seen what Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and this is just strictly on about the Vlad stuff. The trading stuff, that stuff happens all the time. I don't necessarily blame a bad trade because every team at one point will make a bad trade. It will happen and it will come back to bite you. I think the foresight to not understand what Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was going to be. I think that there's some fans as well that didn't understand what Vladimir Guerrero Jr. could or would become. But I think for a lot of the fans, they saw the potential there. And I think at the time when you could have extended Vlad for 150, maybe a little bit more, but you could have extended him for a lot cheaper at the time for a lot of years and locked him up. I think like the foresight of not being able to do that as an organization who sort of born and raised this kid right out of high school and college, that is where it was a little dumb to me. Looking back, that trade, again, like I said, trades are going to happen. Mistakes are going to be made. I'm not asking for a perfect organization. I'm just asking for an organization that when they do make a mistake, they try to climb out of the gutter and do something about it. When we really haven't seen them put their nose to the grindstone and make a difference yet. And we'll see. A lot of offseason left still. Anthony Santander, Alex Bregman, all these guys still out there. Jack Flaherty, who we were going to talk about today, but of course we get into all of this. So we will bring you that Jack Flaherty update video at one point, hopefully Monday. I'm praying, Carter.
Yeah, can't promise that anymore with all the Toronto Blue Jays news that's coming out. Here, I got one more here that I'll probably answer this too. I'll let you kind of think about it for a little bit. And it's out of the arbitration signings. Who is like someone that you can get excited about? Who you think is like the most value in this arbitration? For me, you have Vladdy, obviously Swanson, Varsho, all these guys. For me, I'm getting a little bit Nick Sandlin pilled. I'm starting to get a little bit excited about this guy. Just looking at the strikeout rates, looking at the whiff rates as well for a guy like Nick Sandlin. Just whiff rate last season, 95th percentile, 33.7%. K rate, 27.6%. Going to take that every single day of the week. For a bullpen that was absolutely atrocious last season, I think a guy like Nick Sandlin being a little bit underrated right now. A guy, especially at that like $1.6 million that you're getting a guy for in arbitration. We talk about these bullpen arms. You don't necessarily want to go out and buy all these top tier bullpen arms. Again, in theory, it's nice, but when you're actually running a team, especially when you're the Toronto Blue Jays that don't necessarily go out and overly spend on all these guys, and you look at bullpen volatility, where you look at some of the guys, for example, Erik Swanson, who was very good, then had that little bit of a blurb in the middle. Again, there's different factors that go into it. The the spring training, his son, obviously with that accident, comes back, does a lot better. But Tim Mesa falling off an absolute cliff. Never said Tim Mesa was the greatest relief pitcher of all time, but he kind of convinced me that he was serviceable. Obviously did not end up working like that. So Nick Sandlin is the guy that I'm not going to say excited for, but I'm starting to work up to that excitement for this upcoming season.
Carter, I'm fully on board with you on that one. I think that going in with that trade, nobody really gave too much thought to Sandlin. And now that I've sort of started to go over the numbers, hear a little bit more about this guy, I'm sort of with you. I think it's going to be a little bit of an underrated. And I think the Blue Jays knew what they were doing when they asked for him as an addition piece to the Andrus Gimenez. But Carter, the most value, I think, or the one I'm most excited for, partially Alejandro Kirk. I'll give Alejandro Kirk. I like that deal. I like that money for Alejandro Kirk. But the one by far and above, I think the most value for what you're getting is Alek Manoah. Alek Manoah at 2.2 is unbelievable. I feel like I can see the future with this guy. I think he's going to be back. We saw a little bit of that last season before the injury. And we've heard from him that he almost feels like he's ready. He's back. He's back to figuring out those little things that I think he did before he had that really great season. And I think he sort of let it all get to his head. And then he fell off the cliff. And I think that it humbled him. And I think we're going to see a very good Alek Manoah when he does return. I guess timeline still looks like August for him is, I think, the hope. Ideally, we get him back before that. I just can't see it being too much before that. But the 2.2 value, Carter, I think out of what you can get, if this team is still within a hunt for a playoff spot, and you get Alek Manoah back, another guy that can maybe give you that little bit of an extra push towards the end of the season, I love that 2.2 million.
Yeah, I would have went with him. I don't mind that, but the only issue is that he's only probably going to pitch for 2 months of the season. So $2.2 million for 2 months, still a bargain, obviously. But again, there's got to be a workup period. Is Alek Manoah going to come, whether it's July, whether it's August, hopefully it's not September, hopefully it is August at the latest. Is he going to come in and pitch 6-7 innings right off the bat? Probably not. There's going to be a ramp up. You're probably not going to get 2022 Alek Manoah right off the rip. So by the time he's actually fully throwing and fully looking like himself, it might be September. And who knows where the Toronto Blue Jays are going to be at that point. But Alek Manoah for the future definitely can be in on a guy like that. I mean, he was top 3 in Cy Young voting. You don't just randomly do that. Alek Manoah is still a very good baseball player. And again, another guy, if you're talking about underrated players in the Toronto Blue Jays organization, nobody's talking about Alek Manoah anymore. And again, nobody's going to talk about Alek Manoah at least to start the season, but hopefully he does come back with vengeance and has at least a strong finish to the end of this season. But do you have anything else about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. arbitration? Just anything to end this Friday episode?
Yeah, I got a lot of comments. I was all over Twitter. I had a couple people reacting to when I put out the news as well. Try to be quick on sort of those things. Thank you for those of you who, came on the Twitter, had a couple of conversations with me. That was great. Make sure you do go and follow Braden Five-Walsko and Carter First too. Just in case any Blue Jays news come out, one of us will have the tweet out. We're trying to get our a Twitter together that's maybe like for the channel and for Locked On Blue Jays. We're working through that as we do. But no, I have a ton of different responses from people and stuff like that. But I mean, maybe I can save that, use it eventually. Hopefully, when this eventual Vladimir Guerrero Jr. contract does or does not happen. I guess to wrap up, Carter, I'm happy with all the arbitrations. I think it is a big conversation that needs to be had because I think it really does lay the foundation of what could possibly or won't be a contract for Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting to see that. Hopefully they're making progress. Hopefully they continue to make progress. Hopefully we hear more and more and more about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. because, again, at least we are hearing stuff about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. At least they are attempting to re-sign Vladimir Guerrero Jr. for the future because there's other guys on this team that we want to remain a Toronto Blue Jay for an extended period of time that we haven't really heard anything about that we probably will be talking about within the next coming weeks. So I just wanted to say thank you guys for watching, the likes, comments. Everything recently has been much appreciated. We just checked it. Who was not subscribed. I thought it was always at 68, 69%. What was it? 78%.
Yeah,
a little bit higher than I thought. There's a bunch of you guys that are tuning in. And if you guys are stopping in, tuning into all the podcasts, we would appreciate subscription. It keeps our videos at the top of your page. So you'll be able to get them right when they come out. And then if we post shorts, anything like that, also a higher chance that you will get those as well. But same thing, Braden. You got anything else before we kind of end it?
No, make sure, because you know what, we're still in the grind, but we're as soon as the big signing, trade, anything like that happens, we will be going live. So like Carter said, make sure you guys do hit that subscribe button. That will I think it'll give you like a notification, or you can hit like a bell icon as well, so you'll know that, you know, if we go live, you'll be the first to know about it. You can jump right in, have those conversations with us during the live stream. Makes it a lot more fun when you guys are engaging with us during those things, telling us how you feel. Again, leave comments on this video about how you guys feel about the arbitration, about Vlad's future, about what could happen. As Carter said as well, have a great weekend. Don't do anything stupid, or don't do anything that we would do. Don't do anything that we wouldn't do. You know the drill. Have a good one, everybody.